Hi, I'm Matthew Kelly, and welcome to Profoundly Human. In a world where corporations are increasingly driven by algorithms, analytics, and bottom-line profits, a movement to restore values-based business practices is a breath of fresh air. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Dina Dwyer-Owens, author of Values, Inc., and former chairwoman and CEO of Neighborly. Our conversation covered dozens of topics, from being raised in an entrepreneurial household to her experiences in business and her value-based leadership, to her insights into what it takes to raise a family and nurture faith as a working mother. I hope this conversation helps you reevaluate the way you approach the everyday realities of life, work, family, and relationships. Whether you're a father or mother, sibling or friend, employee or leader, the wisdom of values can elevate you in every aspect of your life. A mother, an executive leader, a woman of faith, the wisdom Dina shares can benefit anyone in any stage of life or career. Watch, listen, reflect, and enjoy. Hi, I'm Matthew Kelly, and welcome to Profoundly Human. Today, my conversation is with Dina Dwyer-Owens. Dina, welcome.
Thank you, Matthew.
Great to be with you.
Yes, exciting.
Very serious questions to get started, as always. Are you a coffee drinker?
You know, I shouldn't answer it this way, but most people prefer I don't have coffee because I have enough energy, and they're like, no, don't give her caffeine. Oh. So I love the taste of coffee, but and it's a decaf coffee typically.
Now, what would happen if you were mistakenly or purposely given regular coffee? What does that look like?
Well, honestly, I might have to run to the bathroom pretty quick. So that's just the truth of it. But I don't know if you call it hyperactivity and hypercommunication just kind of goes up a notch. And people are like, I haven't even had my cup yet. Could you just chill?
Now, do you drink decaf all day, or is it a morning thing, or what does that look like?
Typically, 1 cup of coffee is fine, and I do it more for the flavor than I do for anything. I don't need the caffeine.
Okay, very good. What about favorite food?
That is a really tough one because I love food, and I keep trying to tell myself I love healthy food to try to plant that positive seed. But gosh, pizza's pretty dang good. Yeah. I like pizza.
Favorite brand of pizza?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot because I come from the franchising world, so I better stick with a local.
You better stick with a local?
My husband's pizza on the green egg. There you go.
There you go. Very good. What about favorite movie?
You know, I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter, and The Sound of Music is just come back as my all-time favorite. So it's kind of come and gone, but it's back again.
Good. It's a great movie. What is happening in your life at the moment that you're excited about?
Gosh, I am the grandmother of 3. So I know you've got a young family, but now I'm the grandmother of I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter, Millie, almost 2-year-old grandson, Ryder, and a 16-month-old granddaughter, Della Sophia. So those are, they're just the love of my life right now and will be forever.
Yeah. What are they teaching you?
Oh, to enjoy life.
Yeah.
You know, really the things that they pay attention to is amazing. And they also are teaching me to be a better listener. In fact, my little Della, I can be holding her, the 15-month-old, and if I'm not really engaged in the conversation she's having with me when she can't even really speak yet, she will move my face to look at her. So it's just amazing, just being engaged in who you're with and hearing the birds and noticing the sun, paying attention to the flowers and stopping and smelling them. I could go on and on. Just grandkids are incredible.
It's fantastic. Tell us about childhood. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, so come from a family of 6, a Catholic mother and a father. Most of my siblings were born in New York, so just outside of the city. And I was actually born in Connecticut. So I was the third. I'm the third. So there's Donna, Debbie, Dina, Donald, Darren, and Doug. So all D's. My dad's Don, and he likes the whole D thing. So raised in a very Catholic family. My mother was the one who really took the responsibility, though, of making sure that we went to Mass on Sundays because my father was providing for us and worked a lot, traveled a lot. Was in the entertainment business initially, so that was a tough business to be in, raising six kids. CCE and, all the right things my mother made sure we attended as children growing up. My siblings are my best friends. My father always said that, if we live in an environment where they have to play together, they'll be friends forever. Yeah. And we all still live in the Waco and surrounding area. That's where we ended up landing about 50 years ago, and we're all still in the same area. But really had a wonderful childhood with some challenges as we've all had. But my father was big on building people up to believe that they could achieve anything if they were willing to work hard enough. So he always taught me that, whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve, and put me in front of the greats, whether it was people like in the old days, Robert Schuller, possibility thinking, just lots of Paul Meyer with SMI, Success Motivation Institute. He would pay me an allowance, in fact, Matthew, in late elementary school and junior high. If you'll listen to this, and it was on the old tape recorders, if you listen to this tape 6 times, you can answer my questions, I'll bump up your allowance.
Wow.
I'm thinking, this is so stupid. This stuff is so stupid. But yeah, I'll listen to it and I'll take the extra allowance. So, I'd listen to it. That repetition is the mother of skill, is, what we learned later on. And boy, those seeds he planted at an early age really have benefited me, continue to benefit me today. So really, I was encouraged by my father. He didn't spend a lot of time with us when we were young, but he said, I had a lot to offer them when I can put them to work. So I went to work at the age of 12, worked at a car wash. On the front line, I had to pump the gas and sell the polish waxes and the detail jobs because he wanted me to learn sales early on. I wanted to be on the back of the line with the cute boys, doing the detail work and getting some exercise, but he wouldn't hear of it. And we worked, all of my siblings and I worked in his businesses. He was always very entrepreneurial. So on Saturday mornings, I wasn't, going to hang out with my friends and sleep in late. It was, be at the car wash at 8 o'clock and get started. So I didn't always like him very much, but I loved him. But, he was tough on us kids at an early age, but taught us work ethic that has served me well.
Yeah. What instigated the move from the East Coast to Texas?
Yeah, so he was in the entertainment industry, as I stated. He had a nightclub on Huntington, Long Island, and ended up being the manager of the band Steam that produced the hit record Na 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 Na. Everybody knows that song,
yes,
right?
They do.
It's still played at the football games or chanted at the football games. So he kind of made it big there and decided to follow the industry out to California. So he moved our family to Thousand Oaks, outside of the Hollywood area, and quickly learned that raising your kids during the late 60s, early 70s in that area probably wasn't a good idea, and got out of the entertainment business and got involved in Success Motivation Institute, so became a distributor.
Okay.
And then from there to Waco, because he did so well that Paul Meyer, the founder of that company, invited him to be VP at one of his companies, the Leadership Management Institute company.
And so when you get moved from California to Texas, you were how old?
Going into 4th grade.
And how did you feel about that?
I was kind of excited thinking about, we're going to be in chuck wagons and lots of cowboys and tumbleweed. And it wasn't quite like that. We did live on a dirt road initially. So I had my brothers and sisters. So it wasn't a tough transition for me. Came from a very large elementary school in California to a really tiny country school called Bosqueville, just outside of Waco. I think there were 16 kids in my entire grade.
Wow. Coming
from a school of 2,000, from K to 6th grade in California.
What about your mother? When you look back on childhood and your mother's role in your life, her influence in your life?
She taught me and continues to teach me all the basics of what is good. I'll get emotional because she's special. So even the little things, please and thank you. As kids, she taught all of us how to say please and thank you to everybody, and to appreciate people, respect them, show everybody, dignity. And today she's still at 87 with dementia, still teaches amazing lessons. So yeah, she is special. And she's the one who made sure, I attended Mass on Sundays, and just really helped me fall in love with our faith, our Catholic faith.
You mentioned your siblings a little earlier. What were you taught about being a sibling by your parents?
Well, the 3 girls were the oldest and the boys were the youngest, so we each had a responsibility to one of the boys. So if we'd go out shopping or something, we didn't have leashes on them necessarily, but we were each responsible. So she taught us responsibility. We also had chores. Back in those days, every kid had a chore. So Saturday mornings, no cartoons were coming on until if you had dusting today or you had vacuuming, you were going to do that work. And we really worked together well. And she did that. She really helped create the strength of our family. She's really the glue that held us all together. And she would take us to the farms. We'd have a wonderful outing after we did all of our chores. We get to go to a local farm and see the baby piglets, things that, you just never forget that my mother helped me see the beauty of life. And taking the greenhouse, and we had to all, help pave the greenhouse with bricks and just the mortar in between the bricks. And we did that together, all 6 kids and mom. And it was the most beautiful greenhouse ever. There'll never be a prettier greenhouse in the world because we were involved in it.
So then you get through high school, and what happens then?
Yeah. High school was I want to stop there just for a second because I had the opportunity to lead in high school. My father always said I'd be a leader, but I was a cheer leader, and it wasn't the kind of cheerleadership that you might see today where it's just tons of tumbling and competitive. It was truly about cheering people on and really caring about other people and showing you cared for them, regardless whether it was the football team or it was the person sitting beside you in a classroom who was struggling. So I learned leadership lessons at a very early age in the role of being a cheerleader, and also learned about sales. We had to sell ribbons. There's so many ribbons that had to be sold each week for the games. And so I learned a lot about sales. And of course I was competitive, so I had to always sell the most ribbons. So high school was good. It was another kind of a very small country school. I didn't get very smart from being at that school, but I learned a lot about good people and hardworking people.
You are a competitive person. How has your view of competition changed over your lifetime?
Yeah, I compete against myself more than I compete against anybody else these days. So it's interesting, and kind of, leaving high school and going to college, I didn't even know what the SAT test was. This is how small our country school was. We didn't have college counselors, and I just thought it was another standardized test. And so I did poorly, very poorly on it. Couldn't even get into college. And so my competitive nature started going, wait a second, what do you mean I can't get into college? And my siblings primarily didn't go to college except for one sister. She went to a local community college. And my father really wanted me to go to college because he thought it was a great place to learn, but to meet other people that you could network with for life. And he thought that was important. And basically, we had to beg the president of Baylor University to allow me to go to the first 6 weeks of summer school and see if I could make the grade, the GPA. And I'm like, what's a GPA? I mean, really, Matthew, I didn't know anything about college. And I struggled through that first 6 weeks. And I did make it, but I didn't finish. I didn't complete college because I was working full-time for my father, 30 hours a week in his businesses, and going to school full-time. And it just wasn't fun. And at that stage of my life, I wanted to have fun. So I finally, just said to him, what am I doing here? This is not good. He said, well, why don't you take a semester off from school, work with me side by side, and then make a decision. But in the meantime, get your real estate license. So that's the kind of schooling you could do right now, is just to get your real estate license, because he was building quite a real estate company.
Got it.
So I never went back to college other than, going to teach classes on franchising and entrepreneurship at Baylor University without having had a degree.
Wow. Now, do you ever regret not finishing college?
I really don't.
Yeah.
I learned so much from my father, and not that I always enjoyed working with him, because he was very tough on me. But again, I'm grateful for those lessons now. Back then it was hard.
How did him being tough on you, how did that manifest?
Yeah. Well, it just made me a better person overall, better leader. I mean, he put me in situations that, one example is we went through the savings and loans crisis. So we had a lot of real estate, a lot of commercial multifamily properties, and the occupancies were like 60%, and we couldn't make our mortgage payments. And he said, look, called me into his office one day. He said, look, I need you to go to the bank, tell them that we can't make our payments, so they can either take their property back or they can discount our mortgage by 50%. And I was mad. I said, what do you mean? You agreed to pay this mortgage. You can't tell them you're not going to pay it. He said, well, what you don't understand is we don't have the money to pay it. You can't do that at a 60% occupancy rate. I was furious and embarrassed that I had to go to the banker to have this conversation. Want me to finish that?
How old were you then?
I was probably 22, 23.
And how did that go?
Surprisingly well.
Yeah.
The banker said, thank you for being honest with me. Let me go to our committee and see what we can do. Came back 2 weeks later, discounted the mortgage by 40%, not 50. He said, but the other 10% we want you to put aside into a reserve fund. So if you've got roof leaks or you've got other maintenance issues that need to be attended to, that money is set aside just for that. So we know that the property is being taken care of.
Mm.
What a lesson.
Yeah.
But he just wanted me to be honest. I thought he was breaking our values, by asking me to do something that was against what he had signed. But at the end of the day, he was just being honest. While other people were just giving their properties back, the bank didn't want another property.
Sure. What about your husband, Mike? When did he come into your life?
Okay. I'm proud of the story, but it's a funny story. So I've always been a goal setter. In fact, I love your book, The Dream Manager, but always been a goal setter. My father raised us to set goals. And my girlfriends probably thought I was an idiot. One Thursday night, had been at school, had been working, ready just to go out and have some fun, loved to dance. Called a girlfriend, said, hey, you want to go meet at the little hole in the wall, bar by Baylor University called Outer Limits. And as we're driving up to the bar, I see this really cool looking yellow Jeep. And I'm like, I'm going to meet whoever. This is my goal setting to an extreme, right? I'm going to meet whoever drives that yellow Jeep. So we're sitting there, and it wasn't even about drinking. It was just about having fun, laughing, and dancing. We love to dance. So this cute guy walks up and says, would you like to dance? And I said, well, only if my girlfriend can dance with us because we're here kind of alone. I'm not going to leave her sitting here. He says, okay, brings his 2 buddies over. So then the 5 of us dance the rest of the night. Walks into my car, and guess who walks to the Jeep? Mike. So there you go.
It's the yellow Jeep man.
It's the yellow Jeep man.
What was Mike working for your dad when you met him, or that happened after you met him?
No, he was actually attending TSTC, a technical college in Waco, when I met him. And then, of course, my father was a great recruiter of my boyfriends. So when he finished school, got his HVAC license, my father recruited him to come to work for our Rainbow International. It's a carpet restoration and cleaning company. Back then, it was carpet dyeing and cleaning. So yeah, he came to work after we met.
And what did your dad think of Mike the first time you met him?
I think he liked him.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid of work. So my father loved people who weren't afraid of work.
And what about your mother? What was her first impressions of him?
I think it was good.
Yeah.
Not a negative word came out of her mouth. And I think, it's interesting. Back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any of that. And I said to my mom, how did you let us just go and do the things we did? And she said, look, I did the best I could to raise you in a Catholic environment, and then just had to pray you're going to make good decisions, knowing that you weren't going to always make great decisions. So I'm just going to trust your decision making, and you'll learn from the mistakes you make. So I think she felt good about Mike because I felt so good about Mike.
Yeah.
He was on my goals list too. I'd said that already, but I literally had it on the dream list: handsome, ambitious, blah, 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 blah guy. And
Yellow
so
Jeep.
I got him.
What 32 years marriage, what advice would you have for a young couple just getting married today?
Boy, marriage encounter. Today they offer programs right before marriage. In fact, I think we're required in the Catholic Church now to go through marriage prep. And I think Dynamic Catholic's got an amazing program that I wish I would have had when Mike and I were getting married. So I would say go through the program, go through Dynamic Catholic's marriage prep program, because it's critical to really get to know each other before you get into your marriage, and then continue that. So one of the best things Mike and I have done for ourselves, we did go to marriage encounter early in our relationship. We ran into some trouble in our relationship and went to marriage encounter, and it helped us learn how to communicate better with one another. But today, probably one of the greatest things we do together is we go to retreats. Mike would say, yeah, one of the greatest things we do together is go to silent retreats, because Dina doesn't get to talk at those. Seriously, though, it's just a time that we grow in our faith, and we always grow closer. Every time we go to one of those silent retreats, we spend a lot of time hiking and walking together. We can pray together. So even though it's silent retreat, we do still get to pray together. And that's just really special. We didn't have that when we first got married. We weren't praying together. I was reading the Bible. He wasn't even a Catholic yet. So I would say, yeah, do the preparation work before you get married, if you can. If you're already married, still, go through the programs and go to retreats. Make it a habit, at least annually, to go on a marriage retreat.
What's one of your favorite qualities about Mike?
He likes me just the way I am. He's always been so supportive, Matthew. He's never been critical of me, through the busyness of, being a CEO of a large company and, trying to raise two kids at the same time, trying to keep our relationship strong in our marriage. Mike has always loved me and been supportive and never criticized. I'm criticizing stupid little things, right? Like around the house, but never criticizing me and my leadership role as a mother or as somebody leading a company.
How, with your kids, how do you approach them differently? Like, they're all so unique, right? Is one of the things I'm learning. And you can't really be the same father or mother to each of them. You have to adapt. How do you see that with your own children?
Yeah. When they were young or now, or kind of through the whole gamut?
Either way.
Yeah. When they were young, it was interesting. My son and I were so close. I mean, he was really I don't say mommy's boy, because my husband spent a lot of time with him too, teaching him how to fish and hunt and those kind of things. But yeah, Mikey and I had a very special relationship. And now he's become such a man. He has got a beautiful wife and a wonderful little boy, and is doing just an amazing job as a husband as well as a father. So we spend time together, but not nearly as much. Normally it's like, Mom, can I go take a nap while you, play with Ryder? Because he's busy. So we still get to do a lot of trips and things together, but the relationship is a little bit different now. He's a man. It's his life and he's independent. He's running it. My daughter and I, we were very close too when she was young, but she was very independent as a young girl. In fact, I remember the time she said, Mom, I need some help with it probably was English, because I'm not very good at English. I need some help with my English, 4th grade. And I said, okay, well, can I study the chapter first and then I'll be able to help? She goes, oh, forget it. I'll just figure it out. So very, very independent. And today, of course, we spend a ton of time together. So with the 2 granddaughters, we just have a lot of fun. Beautiful. I'm just blessed with 2 wonderful children.
And they're both close to home?
Very close. Minutes.
How did becoming a grandparent change your life?
Wow. So one of our favorite movies, the kids growing up, is The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. So the best way to describe grandparenthood that I can think of is at the end of the movie, when the Grinch's heart's like busting out of his chest. That's how it feels to be a grandparent. I mean, you love your kids, but a grandbaby comes along and it's just this amazing, it's hard to describe really, but that's the best visual I could give you, is just your heart just beats out of your chest, and it's just an amazing gift.
When you're holding your grandkids and you think about what's happening in the world today, where does your mind go there?
Prayer, right to prayer.
Yeah.
Just praying and also recognizing it. A priest was very good to me about 2 years ago. I went through a transition in our company and I was struggling with a few things. And this was one of the retreats, silent retreats. So I had more time with the priest to really get even a bit of spiritual direction. I said, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing with my time right now. I love being a grandparent and I love spending more time with my husband because I've got the time. But am I supposed to be out promoting, values and leadership? He said, look, do you understand the vocation of being a grandparent? It is, and today it's even more serious than ever. It's always been serious, but yeah. He said that vocation, especially when they're young, is so crucial. And it was like permission. That's okay for me not to have to go down and get busy doing other things, but just to focus on really playing the role a great grandparent should play in the lives of these young children.
What about faith? You talked about how your parents shared the faith with you, and how did you in turn try to share the faith with your children, and how do you hope to try and share the faith with your grandchildren?
Yeah, it's just praying. So one of the things that I did early on with our kids is every time we'd get in the vehicle, we'd start with a prayer, and it has to be fun, right? When the kids are young, it's kind of got to be more fun for them to buy into it. So it was the thank you, God, for a wonderful day. Amen. And then angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here. And we'd say us, ever this day be at our sides, to light, to guard, to rule, to guide. And then a really big amen at the end, and sometimes an hallelujah. And so my kids growing up, we did that. And they've retained that habit. As far as I know, they've retained that habit. So have their friends, which is interesting, right? You get the kids who come in the car with your kids, sure, who are having to hear the prayer. And then eventually I invite them to do it with us. And I remember the one football jock who gets in the car, right, 16 years old or whatever. we were busy. I failed to say the prayer at the beginning of getting in the car. And he's like, Miss Owens, we didn't say our prayer. You're good. So now with my grandkids, actually, Millie was the first. She's the one who's 3 now. And so I've said that prayer in the car with her since day one, since the first time she was in a car seat in my car. Maybe she was 5 days old, 6 days old. We've said that prayer, and my grandmother name came from that. Because at the end, when she could kind of mumble a few words, at the end would say amen, then sometimes alleluia, and she'd say alleluia. So my name became Lula. So that's the grandma name. So it comes from alleluia.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. So just really, in the way I live my life primarily, though, and I read Alan Hunt's book on being a great grandparent. And some of the lessons that I got out of Alan's book have really hit home with me. Like, if you're going to kneel to pray and let your grandchildren see you kneeling to pray. Mm. So it's just doing those kinds of things. So some of the most precious moments I have is when I'm on my knees with a grandchild who's spending the night with me or just spending the day with me. And we pray, or we're in the car and we hear an ambulance go by and we pray for the people that are somehow being affected by whatever's going on with the emergency.
Yeah.
So it's constant. It's kind of a constant thing, Matthew, just like with your children, always being aware of praying throughout the day with them. Going to Mass. I've brought my little Millie to Mass since, again, she was an infant. And I remember the time she looked up at Jesus in a stained glass window and blew him a kiss. And I thought, oh.
When in your life, as you look back, is there a moment where you're able to say, that's the moment where the faith became mine, rather than the faith of my parents or the faith that I was raised in? This moment, like the faith became mine?
It's interesting, I think, people's testimonials around that question. I remember being, I've always struggled with my weight. So as a heavy 6th grader, 125 pounds, and what was I, 4'10"? It's pretty, what do they say, too short for my weight. And my sister was going off to a 8th grade, school trip. She's like, I'm going to bring you a gift home. And I thought, what a cool sister. She's going to bring a gift home. And so what she brought home was a magnet that said, fat is where it's at. Devastated me, Matthew. I just went up to my room and just cried, looked at the mirror, poor pity me. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, just going, oh, she's right. And from then on, I really started to read the Bible. I don't know what happened. It was just every night I would just pick up this little Bible that my brother, I think, had given me. And I would just read it and read it and read it and read it. And I just thought, God, you need to show me that my body is your temple. I need to take better care of my body. And through that summer, it was transitional. I started exercising. I started eating, instead of a Big Mac and the supersized fries and the shake, I just ate a Happy Meal. I just changed my habits. But it was my relationship that I was building with God that made me take better care of myself. So that's where I remember the shift happening. It's like, I've got to own this, and God's here to help me. He's a merciful God, so I'm gonna count on him.
So then you've had this incredible life, this incredible career in business, and have there been times where you were less interested in faith, or distracted from your faith, or neglected your faith?
I wouldn't say less interested, but distracted, I think, is a good word to describe it. Getting busy, being busy. Again, another phrase I think I've stolen from you is having that, you called it the something of urgency. I miss it. It'll come to me. Tyranny of the urgent.
Yeah.
And just, things that just were not urgent, making them urgent because I had such a list of things to get done as the CEO of the company that I started forgetting the things that were most important, like, going to Mass. And so I began to go to daily Mass once a week. I would go to the Mass that my children attended. They went to Catholic schools. And so I started going to that Mass, and I thought, wow, what a difference this makes in the middle of my week on Wednesday morning to go to daily Mass. So I got pulled back in, thankfully. And my kids were teaching me prayers I didn't even know. So at a Catholic school, I did not go to a Catholic school. My parents couldn't afford to send us to Catholic school. So all 6 of us, none of us went. So my kids are coming home and teaching me prayers that I'd never learned. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I really have to get back into my faith life. And then going through some challenging times as the CEO of the company brought me closer to my faith too, because I just realized the best place to go for help is to God. And every time I've done that, it's always worked.
So if you run into a friend or someone comes to you and they're struggling in their life and they've stepped away from their faith, is there a way you encourage them to re-engage, or a step you encourage them to take?
Well, now I'm at the point where I'm okay praying out loud with a friend. For years I wouldn't do that. We wouldn't pray at meals in restaurants. So today I'm very, very much more comfortable with that. So first ask if I can pray for them, and then I would invite them, to join me, whether it's on a retreat or even just sponsoring them. Maybe there's somebody who is financially troubled and they can't afford to go to a retreat. Giving them books. I have found that Dynamic Catholics books have just been an incredible resource for my friends, regardless of their denomination. They've been a real gift, and I can always seem to find the right book at the right time, as long as they'll go back and read it.
And do they read it?
Many of them do, and they come back to me, and they give me the feedback on how it helped them.
Yeah.
And some of them don't at the time that I give it, right? Sometimes it's years later that they read it.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yeah. When you think about, your life as a Catholic, do you have favorite Catholic moments in your life?
Oh, probably one of my two most favorite. I never was really around somebody who would just talk about giving God the glory. That was just not a term I was familiar with. And my mother was very devout, but it wasn't a term that we used around our house. And I remember this small lady who ran our choir for the children at school. And she just did such a beautiful job. We've never had such a beautiful choir because she loved the Lord so much. You could tell in her singing. And so she brought the children into that love. And so one day I just said, thank you so much for your beautiful gift of singing. And she said, God gets all the credit. And that was just a real transitional time in my life. I probably was early in my stage of being the CEO of the company. And I thought, giving God the credit. Wow. Never really thought about it that way. So that was an eye-opener for me. And then another time was on my Undercover boss experience. Getting CBS to agree to, letting me go to church, and then them wanting to follow me into church and coming home from that journey. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But at the end of that Undercover boss journey, they said, we'd like for you to be able to come back to church if you'd like. I'm like, what do you mean if I'd like? Yes, I want to. But the overwhelming sense of being home when I walked into the church after being on the road for 10 days filming this particular episode was just overwhelming. The love I felt walking back into the church and just giving God the glory for allowing me to lead such an organization with so many people's lives at stake.
Yeah.
Under my leadership. It just was a real transitional moment for me.
So your dad started Dwyer Group in 81.
Mm-hmm.
And you became CEO in
99.
99.
Because he passed away in 94, and there was a bit of a transition time, yeah.
Okay. So when you became CEO, what were the dominant thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, I never had a goal of being CEO. Just he always said I was going to be a leader of the company, and he worked as hard and didn't pay us very much, right? You could talk to all my siblings about that. One day, you'll thank me, and yeah, that's another story. But I didn't ask to be the CEO. So we're a publicly traded company, traded on NASDAQ, and our outside board of directors just felt like we had the right people on the bus, but not in the right places. And so they decided they wanted to put me in the role of acting president and CEO. So I'm 35 years old, had never run a company that size, had run a real estate company and been involved in franchising all of my life, side by side with my father. And I thought to myself, okay, I can do this if I have the right mindset and remember that I'm only good at a few things. And I've got to surround myself with people. Some of the lessons I learned from those motivational tape programs I listened to as a child, I've got to surround myself with people that are stronger than I am and be okay with that. But always inspect what I expect, and all those lessons that you learn in leadership. And I was actually up against a battle. So all the businesses of the Dwyer Group, now Neighborly, are primarily home service businesses that had been led by men, mostly male-dominated trades businesses. And I had a group of Mr. Reuters, one of the brands, and one of our larger brands. And a group of leaders in the Mr. Root organization actually got together, and there was a kind of a head leader who did a vote, straw poll vote, should Dina be allowed to be the president and CEO of this company? They didn't really have a say in it, really, other than they were our franchisees and they're critical to the life of our organization. And they voted no, she shouldn't be the president and CEO. So that's the first thing I faced.
Wow.
Right? And so I think to myself, okay, so what do I do with this? And one of the things I've learned by working on my faith is to accept truth when there's truth always before us, and to accept the truth. And so I decided I needed to meet with this gentleman, and big guy, plumber, but a good businessman, really good businessman. And so I asked to meet with him. And the interesting thing was that the whole time I was meeting with him, he was just sweating, thinking, who is this little girl, challenging me? And I wasn't challenging in a disrespectful way. I just said, look, I understand you did a straw poll. You and the franchisees, sounds like you voted against me being in this role, and I'd like to understand why. He said two things. You're not a plumber, and you never run a company this size. So I had to look inwardly and say, okay, you're right. Number one, I'm not a plumber, and I'll probably never be a plumber. Number two is I haven't run a company this size, certainly not a publicly traded company. And again, the Holy Spirit works in beautiful ways, right? Because I didn't think about this by myself. And I said, but you know what I am? I'm the customer. So when your texts go to a customer's house, who typically answers the door? It's the woman of the house. So I'm thinking, who better to run this company than somebody that understands what the customer wants? And all I'm asking you to do is to give me a chance. You know what? I want the best person to lead this company. So give me 6 months. You cannot say anything negative about me or my leadership for 6 months. In fact, you got to stand right beside me. And you got to cheer me on and do whatever I need to do to help me. Because I'm going to have to learn a few things from you, because you're smarter than I am in certain areas of the business that I don't know. He said, okay, fair enough. And he was terrific, along with an amazing team of people, including Robert Tunmeyer, who had been the CEO, strong Catholic. You know him, Matthew. He went from being my boss, the CEO, to working for me. And he did it like such a man would do it. I mean, he's a hero of mine because he was such a man in the way he handled that transition and gave me incredible support. So to kind of end that story, I had a lot of challenges early on, but once I got the buy-in of the team and the franchisees, and I had the right people on the bus in the right places, it's probably one of the happiest times of my life that I had the opportunity to lead that company.
So he said you're not a plumber, and you've never run a business this large. Your father wasn't a plumber. And he didn't say you're not a man, but how much of it was that?
A lot.
Yeah.
And he had a wife and 2 daughters. And so, he was honest. And he said, look, I'm up against all these women. But I don't think he believed that a woman could run that company.
Interesting.
But we became very close friends. Unfortunately, we lost him to cancer, but we became very close friends. And he probably became my greatest cheerleader.
So your dad died in 94. Mm-hmm. What was your role at that time?
Yeah, I was actually helping him sell some of the real estate. I was in charge of the real estate company, and he wanted me to be more involved in the franchising side of the business. So he invited me to, let's get a lot of the real estate sold that requires a lot of leadership and management, and let me get you involved in franchise development. So that was kind of the initial place, is really understand the sales part of franchising. And he had just taken the company public. So took it public in 93, dies in 94 of a sudden heart attack at the age of 60.
Wow.
Young man. Nobody expected it. He certainly did not expect it. So the company had a lot of challenges that we were faced with, because he was a driven entrepreneur, handled a lot of stuff by himself, had not really surrounded himself with a good professional team of people. He had a few.
Never happens with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's right. Had a few good people around it, but not enough good people.
Okay. So what are you doing between 94 and 99, and what are you wanting to do?
Yeah, so I'm having kids.
Yeah.
I'm becoming the vice president of operations for the company.
For Neighborly.
For Neighborly, yeah, back then Dwyer Group.
Yeah.
I'm finished selling off the real estate, so I did get that accomplished.
Okay.
And so I'm really learning the business of supporting franchisees, because I had never been in the support role. I'd been more in the development role, since I was younger, and he had me involved in some other development opportunities, but really had to learn the support role. And really, learn from other leaders in the company. So the few that he had, I really relied on to help me become a better leader.
Okay, and then what about when you become CEO? What do your siblings think about that?
Yeah, so 5 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
A couple of them took the opportunity to get out of the business. And once my father had passed away, they never really wanted to be in the business, but he thought we all should be involved.
Okay.
And that was his dream, but it wasn't everybody else's dream.
Sure.
So there was a lot of support.
Yeah. What was the first franchise?
At Rainbow International, which back then was a carpet dyeing and cleaning company, and today is one of the largest restoration and cleaning companies.
And what came after that?
Mr. Rooter,
Okay.
which is the plumbing and drain cleaning company.
Yep.
And then we started up Mr. Electric, Air Serv Heating and Air Conditioning, Mr. Appliance. My husband, Mike, actually started the Mr. Appliance brand for us because he had that kind of technical background, working with his
Okay.
father as an appliance repairman and then going to the technical school. So he had some stuff to offer and help get that brand launched.
So if an alien came down from some far-off distant planet and did not know anything about franchising, how would you describe franchising to the alien, and what would you say the benefits of franchising are?
Yeah, being in business for yourself, but not by yourself would be the benefit. And what franchising really is we take what's working and we systematize it. So it's taking those things that are working, we systematize it, and then we train the franchisee to those systems so that they too can have success. So it shortens the learning curve. If you, in fact, as a franchisee, take those systems and apply them, it shortens the learning curve to achieving, hopefully, financial independence, whatever your definition of success is, because every franchisee, might have a different definition. But typically, they've got to make money first, right?
Sure.
That kind of fuels everything else that they want to do in their lives. So I hope the alien got it.
I think the alien gets that.
Okay, good.
What do you think people's misconception of franchises are?
Unfortunately, there have been some negative connotations of franchising, and I think there's some truth to that. I think there are some franchisors that weren't about helping their franchisees be successful. It's about helping themselves be successful. But the truth is, a franchise organization cannot be successful unless the franchisees are successful. So I think for anybody to believe that they can do it differently, they're going to fail in the end. And unfortunately, their franchisees will fail too, because we have to help our franchisees achieve success. That's the only thing that drives our success in the long run. Just pretty simple. People complicate it sometimes, but it really is pretty simple.
Sure.
Not easy, but pretty simple.
Understood. I think through the 80s, 90s, we went into a period of time in business in America and around the world where people began to believe that it was no longer possible to be ethical and values driven and be successful and profitable in business. Today, there are organizations that are seen as sort of the champions of this philosophy or disproving this philosophy. Namely organizations like Chick-fil-A.
Right.
But from a values-driven, ethical business model, your father was a pioneer way, way, way before it ever became popular. In fact, right at the heart of when it was unpopular. When did you first realize how important values were to the success of business?
Yeah, he really was ahead of the game there. But, he loved studying leadership. And when he studied great leaders, whether they were church leaders or business leaders, what he learned was military leaders, they were clear about their values. And they made the idea of the values present every day in the organization. And they held themselves and the people around them accountable. And that could be the people that work for them. That could be the people that became the franchisees. That could be the banks that they worked with to help build their businesses. So he got that early on. And his original value statements were, I would say, more beliefs, right? Things like loyalty has meaning to our lives. The one that I still today, I have to remind myself of is so important is we must re-earn our positions every day in every way. He would say, celebrate the victories of yesterday, but don't gloat over yourself on those. Learn from the mistakes of yesterday, but what are you going to do today to make a difference in the lives of the franchisees, the employees, the customers, at that time, the shareholders that are part of this business? And so that just really, really stuck with me. And when he passed away in 1994, one of the things that we knew, Matthew, that we had to keep front and center in our business was the foundation of the values, because that truly was the foundation to the success of our company. right? Because he held us accountable to his beliefs, his values. But when he died, we're like, okay, he's not here anymore. How do we live the values now when the guy who's held us accountable is no longer here? So again, getting back to what's good about franchising is you take what's working and you systematize it. So we actually got the help of a consulting firm, and they came in and they said, why don't you operationalize the values? Since they really aren't black and white, kind of hard to say, how do you judge somebody's been loyal? Yeah, you and I kind of know how you judge if somebody's been loyal, but it's not really a black and white thing. So we took the original code of values that my father had founded the company on, and we operationalized them into today what we call the Live Rich values. And RICH is the acronym for the 4 core areas of our values: respect, integrity, customer focus, and one of my favorites, having fun in the process. So we took those and we added additional values, or you might call them accountability statements, below each one of those core areas. And, every meeting of 3 or more team members, this is one of the systems we created. Let's keep it simple. Every time 3 or more of us meet, let's slow down. It's like a prayer before a meeting, right? But we can't always pray in corporate America. So it's that deep breath before a meeting, and we live our code of values by treating others as we'd like to be treated. We live our code of values by, in our case, in the trades businesses, speaking calmly and respectfully without profanity or sarcasm. Customers don't want to hear our text cussing. So we had very specific, again, I call them values, but you might see them as accountability statements that we trained ourselves to live by. So when you ran into a tough situation, my goal is for people to know the values by heart, with heart. So you're running into a tough situation in business or maybe even at home. What are the values? Which values do you need to apply to the situation? And man, it just became so natural to just look to the values for the solutions.
Yeah. Do you find that the values drove clarity around decision making at every level in the organization?
I would say yes, even the toughest, and especially the toughest decisions. Yeah, I think you and I shared a situation I went through in a challenging time in the growth of our business, where we were in a mediation, and the franchisee was accusing us of not living up to 3 of our core values. And people will do that; they'll attack you, right?
Sure.
You try to do what's good and right, and unfortunately, people will attack you. There's a Mother Teresa. It's not I guess it is a poem. It's not between you and them anyway. It's a wonderful poem for people to go find. But they will attack you. And he was attacking us. But the truth is, there were 2 of the values we had not completely lived up to. And I told our attorney, I'm going to have to own that. And he said, wait a second. You're not going to admit that you guys failed those 2 values. That's going to cost you money in this mediation. I said, yes, I am. Because it's the truth. We didn't do it on purpose. We're humans running this organization. We made mistakes. They weren't intentional, but we did make mistakes. So we have to own it. Cost us a little bit, but you know what? I slept at night.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing to get a good night's sleep.
I've always wondered, have attorneys, HR, these types of people ever recommended, hey, we could talk about the values, but let's put the code of values aside. Let's not start every meeting with it. Let's not, because we're exposing ourselves to situations like the one you just described.
Yeah, I think that there are certainly attorneys, primarily outside attorneys, that we would hire to help with specialties that might encourage us not to spend a lot of time talking about the values. But you know what? When we sat down in those meetings with those attorneys, the first thing we would do is we would review our values. So we had to hold true to those. And you're gonna be attacked, and you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna have to own those, and it's gonna cost you sometimes. But you know what? It's just money. It's not your integrity. It's not your company's reputation. It's just money.
So over the last 30 years, the business has been astoundingly successful, and under your leadership, these values have thrived. How do you think the trajectory of the business would have been different without the code of values?
I don't believe we'd be where we are today for a lot of reasons. Number one, we wouldn't have such clarity about who we are, and we wouldn't have retained great employees. We wouldn't have attracted and retained great franchisees. People are attracted to good, right? And they want to know what's expected of them. I remember my daughter interned at the company one summer. She did not work directly for me. She worked for one of our other brand presidents. And at the end of the summer, I asked her, I said, so what do you think about the values? I want your honest opinion. She said, Mom, don't ever get rid of them. She said, because the only few other jobs she had, she said, I didn't know what was expected of me. Here, I knew exactly what was expected of me. And it's nice to know what's expected. And I like being part of that. So, the values are just crucial to the success of the company, and they continue to be crucial. And I'm grateful that we have a leadership team at the organization that gets that. They get it, and the franchisees get it. And in fact, again, it's the reason certain private equity companies came to us, because our company has grown very rapidly over the past, call it 18, 20 years in particular, because of partnering with the right private equity groups. But they understood it too. In fact, at first they thought we were weirdos, right, from Waco. And what is this code of values stuff? This is weird. What are you guys drinking? And once they got engaged in the relationship, even in the courting phase of the relationship, they're like, wow, you guys aren't kidding. You really mean this stuff. And one of my highlights of my career is that two of those private equity groups actually then took their principles. One group had principles already, but they really took them to the next level. And the second group had no written values and actually began to work on them within 6 months of our relationship. When they understood just how important these were, they called us into their offices in New York and said, we want your help. This is who we think we are. This is what we stand for. But did you experience this with us in the process of us acquiring you? It was beautiful.
There must have been the people over the years who, just wanted to do their job, not interested in the values, like you mentioned, thought you're crazy or that sort of thing, but now they're working in the business. What happens to people like that, or what has happened to people like that in the business over the years? Do they get converted, for want of a better word, or do they just realize this isn't a place for me?
Yeah, both. So some people get converted. Maybe they just do the sales job, right, when you're interviewing them, and they say, oh, yeah, I love these values, because it's part of the discussion, right,
Sure.
during the interview phase. So some people, fool us into believing that, yeah, they really are engaged with the values, and then you see their work ethic, and you quickly realize, and it's not so much that the leader has to realize that, it's their peers. And the beautiful thing about when you have clarity of your values, and in our case, making them a system. So every day we're reviewing the values. It's just not once a year whenever
Right.
we go over the strategic plan or we update it, and then it gets back on the shelf and nobody touches it again for 5 years. It's an everyday thing. And so a team member sitting beside another person in a cubicle that hears them using profanity on the line with a franchisee or a customer, hopefully will peek around after the call and go, hey, we beep each other. So that's kind of the verbal cue that you've just violated a value. It's just a simple beep. So today they might not be beeping as much, but hopefully they're going to have a conversation about, that is not in line with our values. That's going to hurt our reputation. And man, I don't want you doing that. So the other thing is people self-select out, because they do get in. And when they realize that we mean it,
Yeah.
we did play a game. Actually, it was called the beep game. So we were gamifying things way back when. And so we took the new values and we said, look, we need your help, team members. For the next 90 days, we're going to practice these values as a leadership team, but we haven't done this yet. So we need you to give us feedback. Anytime you catch one of us violating a value, just give us the verbal beep, right? And it was like the Roadrunner, if you remember the Roadrunner. It's like the Roadrunner was racing through our buildings. It was just beep, 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 right and left. But bringing the team back together and saying, what do you all think? Can we do this? Are we committed as a whole? Because if everybody's not committed to this, 125 employees back at the time, it's not going to work. And they added the value, actually, Matthew, now that I think back. That was a long time ago. That was in the mid-90s. They added the value that we should never say anything about anyone that we would not say to him or her. That's hard. That's a Catholic thing, right? We should never say anything about anyone we would not say to him or her. And that's probably one of the toughest ones that we have on our list today.
So I remember the first time I heard the Code of Values. I thought, wow, it's brilliant. And one of the things that I've always wondered is, do other companies try to borrow them, steal them, adapt them? What does that look like?
Yes, all the above.
Okay.
So there are some that have called us and said, can we use your values? And I encourage them, and through Values Inc., I encourage folks not to do that, but I encourage them to create their own. It really needs to be personal to who you are as a leader and your organization. What's really important to your organization? Some have taken them. In fact, some competitors have taken our values word for word and copied them, put them on their website and the whole bit. So you have to decide, is that big of a deal that we're going to go chase them down or not go chase them down? But all the above. I think that the most beautiful thing about it is I can't even count how many companies have now created their own core values and systematize them. So that's really the key. You can have values all day long, but if you're not practicing them and have a system for keeping them front and center amongst your team, they're not going to help you. They're not going to do anything for you. In fact, they can hurt you, right? Like an Enron years ago who said, hey, here's our values. Everybody in the handbook signed off that I'm going to follow these values. And then the leadership team completely violated those values. So it's a beautiful thing when people realize, and the thing that I've been faced with the most is a lot of leaders, a lot of CEOs of big companies would say, that's nice, but it's kind of that warm and fuzzy thing that doesn't translate into financial results. And we've got to make a living here.
Yeah.
So again, the book Values Inc. was written to really help them identify that, you can be profitable and not have values and not lead with values. Yeah, you may not last very long. The companies that are most profitable and are sustainable are the ones who truly live their values. A Chick-fil-A, right? Yeah, so you can be a good company, you could be making a nice profitability, but there's other companies that are leading with their values that are going to make over time more than you're making and are going to outlast you.
No question. As I look at the code of values, I do wonder, do you have favorites?
I do.
Tell me about what's one of your favorites?
Well, the favorites are the ones that I have to work on the most. So I could give you a whole list. I think we've got 15 altogether, but there are two in particular that have stood out for me over time. And that reminds me, Matthew, even at the beginning of our annual board meeting, at the beginning of the year, we would go around the table and ask for every board member to give their New Year's values resolution. Which value do you need to most work on? And the funny thing is everybody was not funny. It's wonderful. They were all honest because we're all shaking our heads going, oh, yep, that is the value you need to work on. So my two are listening with the intent to understand what is being said and acknowledging that what is said is important to the speaker. I'm busy thinking about what I want to say next sometimes, and I'm not really listening to what the person has to say. My other favorite one, and I got a lot of pushback when I was leading the company on this one from new people coming into the organization, and it's everyone has the right to their own perspective. And I have people say, no, I'm not going to agree with somebody else's perspective. I mean, if you think about the world we live in today, and there's so many, there's always been diverse perspectives. The world would be boring if there weren't, but man, today. So when faced with a tough, let's call it a political discussion, right? You may have a very different perspective than I do. How do I show respect to your point of view? I listen, right? And I ask good questions. And I become curious. So instead of being defensive, right? Defensive posture just usually takes place right away when you don't agree with somebody else's point of view. Instead, opening up your posture and saying, I really do want to understand why you think the way you think. And it's fascinating what you can learn about why somebody has a perspective that's so different from yours. And what I've discovered is no matter what, I always learn something. I still may not come around and agree to their point of view, and that's okay.
Understood.
And I'm not saying you have to agree. It's just recognize that they have the right to their own perspective. They were raised in a different culture, possibly different environments. Who knows what they've lived with? It's a beautiful one. It's a hard one, but it's a beautiful one.
Yeah. Having fun in the process.
Oh.
Talk to us about that.
That came from during the phase of me becoming the CEO of the company. I told you we had a couple of key leaders on the team that had gray hair already, right? They'd been around a while, very wise. And I'll never forget asking David Bethay. He was a leader of, I think, 2 of the brands at the time. And I said, David, I need leadership advice. I've got so much to learn. He said, Dina, you got to love what you're doing. You've got to have fun doing it. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for you and for all the people around you. But you also have to realize when it's not fun anymore, it's probably your time to exit the business. And so we made having fun in the process a value as a result of my conversation with David Bethay, who was just so honest. so honest about it. And, people, when they would join our organization or we'd go through the values at the beginning of a first meeting with somebody maybe that's going to be a vendor, they were like, wow, that's just not normal that you would have a company talking about fun in their core values. And we're like, it's just critical. Good, moral, ethical fun, but we all should be having fun with what we're doing. Yeah,
Yes.
There's tough stuff we have to deal with, but man, we should be enjoying what we're doing mostly.
Yeah.
And you have to incorporate that though, right? Because you can get busy. You can get busy in the busyness of running a business and forget that. We've got to bring fun into this.
Yeah. So then comes the time you go on the television show Undercover Boss.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. So people got to have fun in the process on my behalf because I was really bad at the jobs. So the backstory to that is, Undercover Boss had 2 seasons already, and 2 of my friends in franchising had been on an episode. And I thought, now, wait a second, what a wonderful marketing opportunity. I mean, our company couldn't afford to get that kind of coverage on national television. So I thought, let's approach them. I have a great publicist, Monica Fide, who reached out to, back then, the particular production company and said, look, we think we have a story you'd be interested in. We have a woman running a primarily male-dominated business. And one of the things that she really cares about that is the foundation for the success of the company are their values. And, in watching your previous episodes, none of the bosses really talk about values, which is pretty much the norm, right, Matthew? Most companies don't have clarity of values. So they go through 80 people to pick one boss.
Mm.
And that's primarily because most bosses say, no way. They want to go after the big Fortune 500 companies and get those bosses. And, they themselves, the CEOs or their boards are going, we're not going to do that. There's too much risk. We don't know what might be exposed. We have no idea what might come out of that.
Right.
You must recognize, though, Undercover Boss would not be in its whatever 13th season if it wasn't fair to the organizations and not, revealing something that maybe could have been super damaging to a company. But regardless, and you had to be fairly good on TV, right? You got to have a decent presence on TV. So 1 out of 80 bosses got chosen, but they came to Waco. They did what they call the casting interview. And a little bit more backstory. So I'm sitting there at church, daily mass that day, thinking about this interview that's coming up. I don't know what to expect, right? They're coming from LA, and the priest is talking about our responsibility as Catholics to evangelize. How often have we heard from the pulpit about our responsibility to evangelize? At that time, I had not heard it before. Never had I heard it. And Father John's talking about our responsibility as Catholics to evangelize any opportunity you get.
Mm.
So that's what I left Mass with. I go into this casting interview, and the guy, starts asking me questions. I'm like, evangelize any opportunity you get. So he's talking about my day. So, we know you're a boss. We know you work hard. So, but what do you do before you go to work? What do you do when you come home at night? We want to know who Dina is. And I said, okay, so, before I get out of bed in the morning, I count my blessings. I have so much to be grateful for. I've got a big day ahead. Every day's a big day. But I want to slow down and take that deep breath and just be prayerful about all the amazing blessings that I have. Get out of bed, go downstairs, make my family breakfast. Husband and I chat over the newspaper and head to Mass. And he said, you do what? I said, I head to Mass. He goes, wait, you're telling me before you go to work, you go to Mass? Why would you do that? My response was, why wouldn't I? What a gift that I get to go to Mass before I go to work and be grounded. I said, it's just the most important part of my day. It grounds me for what's ahead in the day and keeps things in perspective. And that's really helpful to me. And he said, do you think we could follow you to church? And I said, I don't know, let's ask. So Father John did not ask the bishop. So it was one of those things, beg for forgiveness later. But he said, absolutely, I couldn't tell him exactly what was going on, but he said, sure, they can follow you into church. So it was their idea, Studio Lambert's idea, to follow me into church initially. And then we got the green light. So it took about a 3-week process before CBS basically said, we absolutely want to have the Dwyer group on Undercover Boss. And it's just weeks before the filming, they call me and they say, okay, so now you got to come up with your name. You got to have an undercover name that you're not going to forget, because we've had bosses that have just totally messed up a day of filming because they say their real name instead of their undercover name. So I'm thinking, okay, God, what name? Thought about a few pretty names that, I thought, I've always kind of liked the name, whatever. And then I thought, okay, I was very prayerful during this time, Matthew. And again, it's, where my faith also had a big turning point. And I prayed that I would be humble. Not let's go to my head, because, what an opportunity, right? To get on national TV, promote your brand. But I was also going to be very vulnerable. Who knows? I was going to look stupid. I knew I was going to look stupid on a couple of occasions because I'm not good at hands-on stuff. So I'm praying about the name, and it just comes to me, faith. Faith will keep me grounded and hopefully keep me humble on this journey, but it's also a name I'm not going to forget. So I went back to the CBS folks and I said, look, I had to have 4 potential names because they have to do a background check and make sure none of them are real life people that will come sue them because I'm portraying them.
Right.
So it was Faith Brown, Faith White, Faith Black, Faith Jones, whatever. I came up with 4 Faith names. They're like, okay, so we get it. You like Faith. And Faith Brown ended up being my Undercover name. And that was really cool because it was just, I don't know, just helped again keep me grounded in why was I doing what I was doing? Yes, to help get the company some wonderful exposure, right? Expose the good of our company and share the importance of values, values-based leadership. But it was also an opportunity for me to really spend time one-to-one with employees of our franchisees.
What surprised you the most about the show?
Technically, what surprised me is how hard it is to stand around while you're doing filming. I mean,
Yes.
It was painful. And the team that was involved, and thanks to the team here who's making this happen, but the team that was involved in the production of that, 16 some odd people, I think. But if the airplane's going by and you had just done a take with your raw emotions of what you just experienced, sorry, we got to redo that one because the plane just went by.
Yep.
So technically that stuff was really hard. But what really surprised me is I've always loved our team. I've always loved people. I've always loved building people to be, taking your words, the best version of themselves. I didn't know those words back then. Thank you for bringing that into my life. But how much fun I had getting to know the people. I forgot the cameras were even around me because we would spend a full day with every one of what they call contributors. They weren't actors or actresses. They were truly employees of our franchisees.
Right.
And I would just get so engaged in getting to know them that I would forget. But it really reminded me about the hard work that our frontline team members are responsible for, keeping us comfortable in our homes. Wow. And again, I've always respected them and appreciated them, but it just took me to a whole new level of, wow, they have to go into places and spaces that are gross and dirty. And these guys with these big hands can't even get their hands into the plumbing that they need to fix. And somehow they pull it off. So it was a real eye-opener for me. So those are kind of 2 things on the journey. But the other thing on the journey was how God was with me the entire time. And I told the crews that I wanted to go to Mass, while we were out filming. They're like, Dina, we can't go to daily Mass. We just don't have time for it. And I said, well, I've got to go to Sunday Mass. It's an obligation and it's something that I will not miss. So you got to figure out how to make that work. We went to Mass, and my publicist is also Catholic. And we're sitting in Mass during the petitions. And they have no idea. We're just there by ourselves. There's no crews with us or anything, just the 2 of us. And the petition was, we pray for more wholesome and inspiring entertainment. And I'm sitting here going, what? When have you heard that as a petition to Mass? It's just things, these amazing signs and sayings just kept showing up all along this journey. And then at the end for CBS and Studio Lambert to say, we'd like to go back to church when we get back to Waco. Are you good with that? I'm like, of course I'm good. And I totally fell apart. At the very end, I just fell apart coming back into the church because, I felt like I was just home. And I was so grateful for the people who trusted me to be in the leadership role that I was in, but also this weight of responsibility on my shoulders as a leader.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to forget how many lives we're responsible for.
Yes. The frontline people that you filmed with, what were they told was happening?
Yeah, they told we were filming a pilot reality show called Keep Your Day Job. So it was a rouge because, you think, how long can Undercover Boss really go on? So they were told that, would you like to participate in teaching this gal, Faith Brown? She's currently, so we had to lie a little bit, secretary of her husband's business, and she really wants to get out of the office and work with her hands. She wants to really learn a trade. And so at the end of the week, contributor, plumber, electrician, appliance repair person, you're going to weigh in on, could Faith actually do your job? Or does Faith need to keep her day job? So it was really fun. It was a fun ruse. And the sad part is they just teased the heck out of me because I was so bad at the job. So they've got everybody waiting like for the finale of, filming them telling me whether I should keep my day job or not. And 2 of them said, there is no way she could do this work. Like, just need more training. Give me some time. One guy said she's just too old for this. And I'm like, that hurt.
Wow.
But I really wasn't good at the jobs. But I did love being with the people.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, it proved that the values really worked. They all, even though none of us are perfect, they all cared about making sure those values were implemented in their relationship with the customers and with their team members. So that was a beautiful thing.
Powerful.
And again, it was their franchisees' responsibility to make sure that they trained their employees to the values. It wasn't mine.
Right.
It's what we asked them to do, but they did it, and they did it successfully. So it can be done. So if anybody's out there thinking you can't bring values into a very large organization that's got, multiple layers, you can. But it takes real commitment, right?
Yeah. You're recently named to the Hall of Fame for the International Franchise Association. You are the first solo woman to be named to the Hall of Fame. And obviously, enormous organizations involved. McDonald's, Marriott, Subway, etc. Well, what does that feel like?
Yeah. It was surreal when I received the call that I'd be receiving that. And, I don't need that kind of recognition. I just am so grateful that I'm at a place in my faith life where the worldly things just aren't important. Yet there is always a side of you that says, well, that's kind of cool. That's kind of nice. But when I got the call, I thought God's got a plan here, because why else am I receiving this? Really, there are so many other people who are so much more deserving of this recognition than I am. And I just, so I just was very prayerful about, God, what's the plan here? Why am I receiving this? This is incredible. And my father had received it after he had passed away, which was a beautiful thing to celebrate. He deserved it. But I didn't feel as deserving as I felt he was. And so God had a plan. And I think it all ended at the actual annual convention in San Diego just this February, where I had the opportunity to just say a few words. Thanked a lot of people, because none of us get to where we are in life without the help of a lot of people. And I could never remember all the people that have helped me. So I did my best to acknowledge, those folks who I believe were instrumental in helping form me. But at the end of the talk, it was really all about the wisdom that I gained in the 39 years of working with amazing people and working at the International Franchise Association with incredible people. And, some of the most intimidating, what could be intimidating leaders of very large organizations were the nicest people. I found to be some of the nicest people you could ever meet.
Yeah.
And everybody's got a heart. Everybody's got a heart. And if you just give time for people to show you their heart, it's amazing. It's the everybody's got the right film perspective thing. So my words at the acceptance was, I've learned 3 key things that I need to get better at. And I'm still working on these things today. One is to be, more generous, and then to be more humble. I've been prideful. Sometimes I think I'm the one who's made this happen, and it's the furthest from the truth. And then to be more loving. And I love St. Thomas Aquinas's definition of love is to will the good of another. I love everybody. If that's the definition I'm using, as much as some people have hurt me, I still love them, because I want the best for everybody. I only want what's good for people. And then thanks to you, I kind of wrapped it up with a 4th. I said, if you really want to get good at those 3 things, which I want to get really good at, you got to spend some time in the classroom of silence. And I encourage them, just the 10 minutes. The 10 minutes is what I learned from you, that your mentor taught you. 10 minutes of the classroom of silence and pray. And I shared that my favorite prayer is, thy will be done, constantly praying, thy will be done, thy will be done. And that's how I closed my talk. And you and I are both speakers. And, my goal is always, if I can just somehow touch one life in this room of 3,400, then it was worth this opportunity to say a few words. And I had more people than one come up, and I'm grateful for that. One person came up to me who said it was exactly what she needed to hear, and she was just in tears. She was from another country, and it was a blessing. It was a real blessing. But God had a plan. I don't know. I don't know who else might have been touched by those pearls of wisdom that I gained from other people.
40 years in business, raising a family, grandchildren now.
Chief grandmother officer. I don't know what I'm called now.
Chief grandmother officer. What are you looking forward to in the future? What are your hopes and dreams going forward?
Oh, gosh. Well, this is not to just build up the beautiful organization that you've created here, but I am most excited about my role in helping spread the good news through Dynamic Catholic and the work that you do. You've helped me touch lives in ways, again, that I won't even know, by sharing the books, by inviting people who aren't even Christian in some cases to read the books and become a better version of themselves as a result of the books. I'm involved in Young Catholic Professionals, and I'm so excited about these young people who want to keep their faith alive in the workplace. And there's hope. There's so much hope in our world, Matthew, when I think of this, and I think about my grandkids. And so I'm very excited about the role I get to play in helping form their lives. To the extent that my children and my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law allow me to be involved in that. But it's a beautiful opportunity. I know it's a critical time in their lives too, to lead by example and share things. And when my little granddaughter, who's 3 now, says the prayer in the car by herself that I've said in the car since she was a baby. Yeah. Thank you, God, for a wonderful day. Amen. She says, Lula, I want to do it by myself. I want to do it by myself. And she's proud to pray for us in the car by herself.
Beautiful.
Yeah, gives me chills. It's fun.
You look back on your life, what's some of the best advice you've been given?
Oh, gosh. One is, and this was a Dr. Robert Schuller, I just never forget the possibility thinking cassette tape series where he said, the best leaders surround themselves with people that are smarter than they are, that complement their weaknesses, and be okay with that. Be really okay with that. So that's a big lesson that I've carried forward, because I really am only good at a very few things. And then I've just had this amazing team of people in my life, in all areas of my life who've just helped me.
What do you think stops people from surrounding themselves with other talented people?
Fear of somebody maybe taking their position, which is so sad. But it's just the reality of it. Ego really can get in the way of that. Thinking they're better, thinking they're smarter, thinking I don't have the time to teach them to do this because I can do it faster than they can do it. It's always flabbergasted me. It's like, what, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It might take you a little while to teach them, but once they've learned, how much more can get done in the organization because they're doing it now instead of you. Now you can do what you're best at doing. Those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah. Your father obviously had an enormous influence on you.
Yes.
And, sadly, we live in many ways, a fatherless society now. More than 50% of children are being raised separated from their biological fathers. What do you think your dad would say if you were here today?
Yeah. Well, he was in the process of getting ready to write another book. Like you, he felt books could really create a movement. And his next book was going to be The Family Dinner Table. Because he was seeing it happen already. In the early 90s, he was seeing how broken the families were and how these young boys and girls not having a father figure was already affecting families. So he saw that long ago. So gosh, what would he say today? Father, step up. Step up, be the spiritual leaders in your families.
Yeah. I
think that's one thing he would say, and he would say it very boldly. Because I think he'd say, I wasn't the spiritual father I should have been when my kids were younger. He did so much good for our family, so much good. And he was such a provider. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, when our family was young. And money was success to him in many ways. That's how he defined success. But in his heart, it really wasn't. But I think he'd say he didn't do everything he should have done at an early age. Because my brothers, they missed him. They missed having him. But then he offered work, so at the age of 12 or 13, everybody got a good dose of dad.
Yes.
And that was good for my brothers too. But I would think he would talk to the dads in the world today and say, step up, right? Be the spiritual leaders of your families because the women are taking the lead. I see it everywhere I go, Matthew.
Beautiful. Dina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you. Keep up the God work you're doing here. It's amazing.
Thank you.